Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Josh McGower. I'm the director of Biodesign, and it's a pleasure to have you all here tonight for a very, very special evening. Tonight we are honoring and recognizing someone who is truly an icon in this industry. In fact, helped create the industry and has been present and central in so many of the pivotal moments that created the medical device industry itself. And so it just is amazing pleasure to have Casey McGlynn here tonight for this interview. So Casey, thank you so much for being willing to do this, because we did have to twist his arm a bit, I will say. Before I get into that, I'll just mention that tonight is sponsored by Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati. And we're very thankful for that sponsorship. Thank you so much. And really, Casey, in his vision for the medical device industry, has been a long time, and Wilson Sonsini has been a long time supporter of Biodesign, and really present and active in so many of the fundamental activities that we have enjoyed over all this time. And I know Philip and team will be carrying the flag forward, it's just an amazing contribution, not only to this industry, but for the patients that we have all served, made possible by the successes and fantastic legal leadership and really, I'd say, organizational management leadership that Casey has brought to all of us. So we have a lot to be thankful for. So before I get on to further announcements, I'm going to mention that tonight is also a special night because it is the Tracy Lefteroff Lecture Series, which is in partnership with Biodesign and Fogarty Innovation. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Andrew to say a few words. Andrew Cleland.
Thanks, Josh. And as you can tell, as you most of you know, I should say, I'm not as polished as Josh, so I need some notes. And if there was no other comparison, oh, you do have your notes. That's good. I was gonna say, look at the outfits: a beautiful fitted jacket versus a golf shirt. So look, thank you all for coming tonight. This presentation from the Innovator's Workbench is named in memory of Tracy Lefteroff, who passed away almost 10 years ago. Wow. Tracy was a giant in our industry. Many of you had the privilege of working with him, but for those who didn't get the chance, I'd like to say a few quick words. Tracy, along with his good friend, Casey, tonight's guest speaker, really shaped our industry. He rose to become the global managing partner of private equity and venture capital at PwC. But more importantly, he was known for his remarkably insightful business advice and counsel. And I did say business, not accounting. He was so much more. He counseled many folks who were and went on to become leaders in our industry. He was the quintessential connector of people, both at the professional and personal level. I think I said this last year, but I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to spend time with Tracy and with Casey in my first CEO role, meeting often at his table at Ilfanayo in Palo Alto. I don't know, some of you will all remember, right, walking in and there was Casey's and Tracy's, and it was pretty awkward when you forgot who you were meeting with. Tracy was gracious, generous with his time, and thoughtful in his advice. For someone who had achieved so much in his career, he remained remarkably grounded. He genuinely cared. In recognition of his impact and in his memory, we, along with the Lefteroff Advisory Committee, host an annual internship program where college students from around the country spend a summer living the MedTech startup experience. In addition, as Josh just said, we have the privilege of co-hosting tonight's event, along with Josh and his team, the folks at Wilson, and MedTech Strategist. So welcome to tonight's show, and let me hand it back to Josh. I was going to say David. My notes are wrong.
Thank you. So we are recording it tonight. We're also broadcasting this, so if you could silence your cell phones. Also, to mention, immediately after, we're going to have a nice reception out there with some food, so please stick around for that. And with that, I hand it over to David Kasich from MedTech Strategist. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh. This is a real treat for me personally. Casey has touched the lives of so many careers in this industry and been instrumental in the success of so many, and I will just say parenthetically, none I would say more than mine. We've enjoyed a very close collaboration for years, and I'm just delighted to be able to spend a little more time talking to Casey about his career. So we now want to talk a little bit about some of the people who've touched and influenced your career, but before we do that, I want to acknowledge somebody in the third row. Kathy McGlynn, would you stand up? And I understand I understand that Molly and Katie and Patrick are here as well. You can stand up or wave your hands or something. Anybody who knows Casey knows how important family is to him. If you really want to understand who Casey McGlynn is and why he brings such dedication and commitment and passion to what he has done for all these years, you have to know his family as well. So let's get to some of the people who were instrumental in your career, aside from them. The first up has to be Ray Williams. So for those who didn't know Ray Williams or remember who he was, talk about that early origin story. You were a young attorney up from Santa Clara, starting at Wilson Sonsini, and was it Larry Sonsini who introduced you to Ray Williams? And who was Ray at the time, and what were you doing with him?
Sure. So let's see. So I met Ray. Basically, I was sitting in my office. It was about a little bit wider than this chair, with a little table in front of it. I was a first-year associate at a very small law firm, but very connected law firm in Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley wasn't even that common a saying at that point in time. Anyway, so Larry walked down the hall. He said, "Casey, I'd like to introduce you to Ray Williams. He's got a new company he's starting." And so he left him with me to help him with the organization of the company. And so that was my first meeting with Ray, and he brought in, as he always did, if you knew Ray well, he was always carrying a pile of stuff. He always had a lot of papers with him or things. So he walked in, and he brought the materials that I was going to need to kind of figure out where that company was. It had been incorporated, and just kind of what, if anything, still needed to be done, because he wanted to go raise some money for a company that he was working on. At that point in time, I really didn't know what the company was going to do, but I met this man, and he was, I would say, such a humble person. It was just really surprising to me. And Ray's background was he had come from IBM with a person by the name of gosh, I'm sorry. The first computer, yeah, that's right, with Amdahl, and he was the CFO at Amdahl. So, and he had gotten a bad back. It really hurt him, and so he either had to have an operation, or he had the doctors told him that he was going to have to, basically stay very calm and lay down and for about 4 or 5 months while his back healed. And rather than go and take a chance that something would go wrong with the operation, he decided to take a leave of absence from Amdahl, a leave of absence that he would never go back to, and basically rest and let his back heal. And of course, after a month or so, he had friends in the Valley, and he began to talk with them and began doing projects. And he was always a guy that was very animated with regard to doing research on something and following up on it, et cetera. So he began following up on various projects that he was going to fund. So that's the Ray Williams I was meeting, and he was about to start a company, and was in the process of starting a company called Advanced Cardiovascular Systems. And he came in and he told me it was in the cardiovascular area. I didn't really, as he left, really have much of an idea what the company did or who the other people involved with it were, but he wanted to get the documentation ready to kind of raise some money. So that was my process and first meeting with Ray. And over the next 4 months or so, as we got the documents together, and he went out and met various individuals in the Bay Area to finance the company, many of whom he knew, and some that he didn't. I worked pretty closely with him. And we became really fast friends. He only lived a few blocks from my house, and so if I had a document that he was interested in, I'd drop it off at his house on my way home, and if there was something he wanted to get from me, he'd call me up and walk over to my house. So we became very fast friends. And that's basically how I started with this company, Advanced Cardiovascular Systems. Now for me, when I look back on that company, Advanced Cardiovascular Systems, you have to ask yourself, what kind of company was it, and what was it, and what did it do for me? This company was the most amazing company. They were in an area, and I didn't meet, to be honest with you, John Simpson, who was the inventor, along with one other doctor. I didn't meet John until after the financing had actually been closed, and they had a board meeting, and John came to it. But anyway, it was a wonderful time, and the company was a very exciting company. Like I said, John was very inactive in that company because he was building his practice at that time, and he was working on cases, and he was working, with trying to get the product just right. And but we did manage to get the financing closed, and we worked on not that I was involved actively, but we hired a regulatory consultant to help us work with the PMA submission. And Ray told me that it might take 3 or 4 years to get that approval. He was, quite worried about how he was going to fund the company for that entire time. And the company had a few other individuals that were there. Bill Starling was there. Maybe many of you know him, Bill, but this was the beginning of his career. Will Sampson, Carl Simpson, all of them would become well-known names in the Bay Area, but they were very young guys at that point in time. And so we moved along with the development of that company, and when we finally filed for the PMA, Ray told me that it could take over a year for us to get an answer, or even 2 years. So I thought, boy, this is a very inefficient business we've got here. The federal government sure doesn't help you get these companies started. But to be honest, the PMA actually came very rapidly. Within about 6 months, the FDA actually approved this product, and we were ready to go. Now, the second person that made up that company was a guy by the name of Robert Reese. And Bob Reese was an engineer, but he became the president of the company shortly after the company was funded, and with venture capital. And he was another major mentor for me. He lived in San Diego. He flew a plane, and he would fly up from San Diego every Sunday night. And he'd get there early. He'd get there and he'd start work at ACS on Monday morning, first thing, early. Expected everybody in there. He's a very, very kind of orderly guy, and he would work through Friday and leave like Saturday morning and fly home for the weekend. And that was his activities. And he was just just an incredible driver with regard to building this company, and all by himself. I mean, he was not by himself, but his programs that he had put into the company, et cetera, were really quite marvelous. And we had just a great group of people, many of whom, hopefully some of you are here today, but these people spent the rest of their careers after ACS in this medical device industry doing things in marketing and venture capital, in FDA regulatory work, et cetera. It was really an incredible group of people that were there.
And just to fill in the other piece to this, not only was ACS and John Simpson instrumental in establishing interventional cardiology as a major device category, but think of Guidant, because that was the foundational base of what became Guidant Corporation.
Absolutely. So eventually the company, it came time for us we'd raised several rounds of financing, and we had just terrific, terrific venture capitals. We had Dick Kramlich from NEA, and we had a Pathway Ventures from where the individual was there, Norm Dan. He was had been a sales guy for the implantable business at Medtronics, and built a venture capital business. And so we had really great people on the board of directors, in addition to Tom Fogarty and John Simpson. And it was really, just an incredible, group of who's who at that point in time. So we eventually sold that company to Eli Lilly, and it was quite an amazing story. We worked on an earnout. It was the first time that I'd ever worked on an earnout, and the earnout, interestingly enough, was done by Fred Frank. And much of the terms of the earnout had Bob Reese's input. And the interesting thing about it, for all of us that have sold so many companies over the years and think about how much of the earnout we earned in those things, it seemed like very illusory dollars. But this earnout, the only dollar we did not get the only money we did not get out of this particular sale was the very first payment. And these payments came in quarters over 4 years. And the first quarter, we missed our sales numbers, and it was just the first quarter. And I look back on that and I think, this is just really unheard of. But it was because we had bought a facility in Temecula that was like 100 miles out of San Diego in the desert. It was 400,000 square feet, and we had 200,000 of it rented, and 200,000 square feet that we used for the facility. And I remember flying down there as we were, right before we signed this deal with Lilly, flying down there and going to this facility, and I could not see from one end of the room to the other, and I for sure could not have run that far. It was just unbelievable, totally empty. And at the end of the earnout, it was totally filled with several hundred people working day and night at multiple shifts in order to provide products. So it was such a great launching for me in the medical device industry, because all of the people that were there ended up becoming clients of mine and the firm over the next 5 or 6 years. And it was just such an amazing experience to see them come back and be willing to work with me again, and also to have these incredible ideas that they had come up with. So it was such a great beginning for me, and I have to say, everybody that I worked with there was just really the finest you can imagine.
Yeah, and it's hard to overstate how important ACS has been to this industry and particularly this community here. But you mentioned Fred Frank, and I'm not certain whether his name resonates. I think Fred actually passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a legendary banker at Lehman Brothers and was an absolutely critical figure in the launch of the biotech industry out here. In the biotech industry, I know during this time, although you became best known, I think, in the med tech space, obviously, which is why we're all here. But I know you're also at this time building up a practice in biotechnology as well. And that's actually where Tracy Leftroff comes into the picture. Talk about those early days with Tracy and some of the stuff that you were doing in biotech while you were also building this med tech practice. Because in those days, everybody thought biotech would swamp med tech in terms of value creation.
Yeah. Well, So the biotech industry was quite illusory when I began my career. There were no approved products at all. There was a great fascination with the science, and there was a significant group of people in Palo Alto and at Stanford University that were working diligently in this area. But like I said, there were no approved drugs. It was still a very tomorrow idea. But nonetheless, there was great interest and promise in this area. And I honestly don't remember even how it was that I got appointed to the board of directors of Bio as a very young, still an associate at the firm, lawyer. I guess in my first year, I had incorporated 2 companies. One was a company called Monoclonal Antibodies. And this was a company that was a spin out of Stanford University. And I remember him, Tom Glaze, the CEO, coming to meet me and telling me that he was starting this company. He just graduated from the business school. He didn't have any background in the sciences, but he had met at Stanford during the summer this famous geneticist or scientist from Norway. And that this guy had agreed to come over and help him start this business. And then he told me that the funny part about it was that this guy wouldn't fly, so he would take, from Norway, he would take a boat. This is like, he's out for the summer, and he'd have to go through the Panama Canal and up through to California, up to San Francisco before he got here. So I figured, he must be here a week or two a year at least. It was just the craziest thing. But this company, again, went public within maybe 3 or 4 years. It did not have a product. It was the typical kind of story with regard to a biotech company. And then, just to say how lucky can you be, it was as a public company, it was acquired by Hybridtech, and then acquired by Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly bought Hybridtech. So it was again, this was a major deal. This Hybridtech deal. It was a company located in San Diego, and was one of the first premier biotech companies around. So it was just a really great story of a company that could start basically with just a simple idea and one scientist 4,000, 6,000 miles away from you, and still turn out to be something successful. It was a really incredible time.
So you and Tracy were, I wouldn't say exact contemporaries, but you were both beginning to build practices out here. And I know that you collaborated a lot around both medtech and biotech. And am I right in remembering that Grant Heydrich from Mayfield was another company, and I always make that mistake, was another person who played a critical role. How did your and Tracy's relationship come about, and what reflections or comments do you have on the role Tracy played? Because Tracy and you would collaborate in a bunch of stuff.
Well, Tracy is one of my heroes in life, honestly. He is one of the finest human beings I ever met. And he was a big guy, so you never got in an argument with him because you were going to lose. But I really did love him. And he was in Seattle, and he was as a young accountant, and they saw, I guess, some marketing talent or whatever it was, but they moved him down to Palo Alto, and he was given the assignment to be head of the life sciences practice there. And I hadn't met him yet, but I got a call from him, and he said, "Hi, it wasn't Coopers then. I think it was just Coopers and Lybrand, and Coopers was the firm that used to have an office in our building. So we were very close as a firm to Coopers. And so I suspect that's the reason that Tracy found me. But nonetheless, he had a real interest in the life sciences area, and we got together and began to think about what could we do that would be fun collaborative activities. And he wanted to do a conference. He didn't really care in the med tech area or in the life sciences area, and he wanted to get. He was thinking first about getting Kleiner Perkins, but of course they already had a biotech conference, and I said, let's see if we can find somebody else, and so we found Sam Colella, who was he was not at his final fund, but he was at IVP, I believe, at that time, and.
Later versus.
Yeah, so he wanted to do one because he was very competitive with Kleiner Perkins. He wanted to do one in the biotech area, but of course my practice was mainly in the med tech area, and I felt doing another one, to be an also ran in an area, just seemed like a crazy thing. So eventually we talked Sam into doing a medical device conference, which was what Tracy and I wanted, and we started the Phoenix conference and really got a lot out of that, but also began to build a a very close relationship. So we would end up, most of my clients and most of his clients would either be using me or I'd be using him, and we would, be helping each other, with interesting projects that we would see. And of course, he was such a great guy and such a good leader and had such a solid mind and good heart. I would say he's a guy I really admire and miss terribly.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to Tracy in working in the biotech industry, you're also working with Grant in this time. And that led to a lot of time for you in Seattle. What role did raising capital play in what you were doing with biotech and medtech companies? And was there a point at which it became obvious, or was it a conscious decision to focus your efforts in the medical device industry? I mean, you became such a dominant figure in the medical device industry, particularly in this community. But clearly, if you go back 20 years, biotech industry was much hotter. I mean, medical devices wasn't showing up on the cover of Forbes and Fortune. But it's really the medical device industry in which you've established your career. Was that a conscious choice? And how are you building out your Wilson Sonsini team to capitalize on the medical device industry?
Well, I have to be honest, I wanted it to be both biotechnology and medical devices, but I don't think it was possible. It's just they're very different businesses. They're capitalized in a different way. They use different venture capitalists. And honestly, I didn't have a science background, but I was on the board of directors of Bio for probably a decade or maybe even longer. And I traveled to those meetings and went to their annual meetings and put on panels with investment bankers and CEOs for about 10 years. And I enjoyed it. It's not that I didn't think it had the potential to change the whole world. But the biggest event that happened while I was on the board of directors was, the approval of the first genetic tomato. So I can't say that I was there during the, during the great years of biotechnology. And when you see what biotechnology is doing today, I'm so glad that the firm had a second chance at getting into the biotechnology industry. And I just want to say that one thing we had a terrible time doing as we built the life sciences practice was building a patent practice at our firm. Because we would hire somebody to do patents, and in the tech side, they wanted to pay $10,000 max for a patent, and on the biotechnology side, they wanted to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, or would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we knew that we in the life sciences area knew that it wasn't really going to work for us to be doing tech patents. On the tech side, although the firm wanted this group to do everything, it needed to be in the life sciences area, in medical device, and in biotechnology. And so we went through, I think, 3 or 4 patent attorneys over a 4-year period of time. First, it was going to be the whole firm was going to work with these guys, and then it was going to be just the life sciences group, but they still kind of got in there and made these people do the tech patents. And finally, we met a guy by the name of Vern Norville. And Vern was a patent attorney, and he'd been at a public company, and he was just an amazing guy. And when we hired him, he was able to begin to build a really incredible patent practice for us, focused on the biotechnology industry. And today, I think we have a couple hundred patent attorneys in the firm doing nothing but life science work. And eventually, we got Jim Heslin to join me. And Jim Heslin had been my counterpart at another law firm in the patent area that represented almost every one of my medical device companies. So it was, I think, a great success for us, although it took us a long time to end up with just the right people in our patent practice.
Yeah, well, and also critical this time was the hire of Dave Hoffmeister to create an FDA practice.
Yeah, so this is a great story too.
It's so important to the medical device industry.
So David was at the company that developed the birth control pill. He was a young FDA attorney there. working on all of their regulatory matters. And when that company was sold, they decided to move basically the whole business out of the Bay Area, and so they fired all their lawyers. They had about 50 lawyers doing patent work, they had trademark work. They had 8 or 10 patent lawyers, 8 or 10 trademark lawyers, and then they had a large regulatory practice that David worked in, but we had a more senior person there, and so. I wanted I wanted the whole group, but the firm said, Casey, this is too much for us to bite off on, and we're not really sure this is something we want to do, but why don't we hire these 2 guys on the regulatory side? So I thought, oh, great, this is another leg of the stool, this will be great. So I called 50 people to make sure that these guys were good guys, and every call I made for David Hoffmeister, the people honestly wouldn't let me off the phone. They just had so many great things to say about the guy. And then this older guy, whose name will go unmentioned, I would call them, and everybody I called would either not return my call, or if they did, had nothing nice to say. Well, nonetheless, the firm didn't hear me through, so they hired both these guys, and we hired them. And this story gets even worse, because I am on the hiring committee that year for chance when this individual is up for partner. And what I know that nobody else knows is I really want this other guy to be made a partner to grow this practice. And the problem is that if we're a small firm still, it's just never going to happen. We're never going to get 2 partners in that practice. So I had to go through the agonizing process of educating that group to realize what really needed to happen. And of course, when it did happen, the whole roof blew off off the building, and it was quite a bad scene. Anyway, I did get my way, and David Hoffmeister did become a partner eventually.
So during this time, raising capital remained an important critical issue. And I wonder, we talked about some of the executives you work with, but I wonder how your relationship with the venture capital community out here evolved, and whether the focus on medical devices was a factor in the kinds of relationships that you built. I mean, maybe difficult to remember, but there was a time in the mid-90s when, in fact, and maybe even earlier, when in fact biotech was largely considered to be overly hyped. And that was why Lilly bought ACS, was because no one wanted to was that they were leery of making investments. Big Pharma was leery of making investments in biotech because, frankly, biotech hadn't delivered on its promise yet of turning out major therapeutics. So there's a whole interesting tension between biotech and medtech during this time. And I'm wondering how your relationship with the investor community out here played, because there seemed to me, just as an observer, a kind of dynamic between medtech investors and biotech investors. A lot of investors turned to medtech as a kind of alternative to biotech that wasn't really delivering on the promises that they had seen in it.
Well, I would just say the investors that invest in biotech and the investors that invest in medtech, although the funds were often similar, the talents they needed were radically different. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be a biotech investor in early stage biotech, you really have to understand the science. You really have to have a deep learning and understanding in that area. And so if you're a super large firm, you could have the talent you needed to do biotech investing and medtech investing and tech investing. But honestly, at that time, the firms were quite small. They grew. I mean, even NEA was a small firm at that point in time. Yeah. And so it was very difficult to be able to do. That's not to say that some of them didn't. For instance, one of the early investors in ACS was a biotech investor, and but everybody, as things matured, honestly, the camps, there was a parting of the Red Sea there, and if you were investing in medtech, you probably weren't investing in biotech. It's just the way it worked. And of course, it became harder. The deals in biotech were bigger and the returns were bigger if they were successful, but there was lots of risk. And medtech, Some of these deals could be gigantic, but not all of them. And so it was just there was a parting of the way that was naturally occurring. Although we still at our firm we wanted to do both of those, and as the firm grew, we were able to get expertise in all of those areas.
So the hiring of people like David Hoffmeister and others, Jim came a little bit later, Jim Heslin came a little bit later, was instrumental to building out your practice. You mentioned...
He could, by the way, do both because, they had the first birth control pill. That was their product. But they also had a number of devices, and he worked on both sides of that marketplace. So he was a very knowledgeable, super knowledgeable guy.
So you mentioned before Phoenix, and you've been affiliated not only with Phoenix, but I would also, again, as an observer, make the reflection that the Wilson Sonsini Medical Device CEO Conference has been at least as impactful on this industry and bringing insights into this industry as Phoenix has been. In fact, as part of the Phoenix conference, I can tell you that the June Medical Device Conference is at least as significant an event in this industry on an annual basis. When did it occur to you, or what was the thinking behind holding a medical device CEO conference that has become the June conference?
Okay, so this is how it started, and this is kind of a somewhat humorous story. So if anybody is here from WSGR, just put your fingers in your ears. So we decided we wanted to do a medical device. I decided that. I was working with some people, and I said, let's do a medical device conference. So I went to Larry Sonsini. He said, yeah, that's great. Let's do a medical device conference. And then he began to come up with names of all the general counsels he knew at healthcare companies, both in Los Angeles and up here and in some other areas. And so he invited the general counsels this was his vision of a medical device conference. And I was going to be on a panel, but I could see this, I would have nothing to add to this. Larry is a brilliant securities lawyer, and that's what he wanted to talk with these general counsels about, taking these medical device companies public and the issues of the complex issues related to that. Now, I was thinking about basically having CEOs come up and talk about the problems they had and how they solved them. So I was on a totally different page. But I knew that the key to this whole thing was time. So what I did was I said, oh, Larry, yeah, let's get them all in there. And then there wasn't quite enough room for me on the panel. I said, oh, don't worry about that. There's no problem at all. So I went to the meeting. He had 27 general counsels from Los Angeles and up here in the Bay Area and a few other places. And they talked about 10b-5 and going public, and it was a wonderful meeting. And after that he left, and I talked to the marketing department, and we never talked to Larry again. So that's how we ended up with a medical device conference that could focus on the issues that the CEOs had, not the lawyers had. I mean, how unimportant is that, really?
And yet, the June meeting has been a major
yeah,
factor
this is how it began. Yeah. It's that first one that was not that key, but it was a beginning. I knew once you start something, you can just make it grow every year. Think about your conferences and how they grew every year. I can remember you inspired me. I went back to a biotech conference in New York, and you and your partner were putting it on, Roger. Yeah, and I just remember this room was filled with probably 200 people, and there was so much energy in the room, and I just thought, boy, this is exactly what I'm going to do.
Well, I think the first thing you and I did together was actually a talk I gave at the June conference. I can remember a solo speaker standing at a podium talking to a small group of people, and to think of what that conference has become. And like I said, we're part of Phoenix as well. I don't mean at all to denigrate Phoenix, but the June conference has become such a major factor in this industry, in terms, particularly in reaching a certain sector of the industry and informing and enlightening them about the trends that are going on. And as somebody who over the years has occasionally helped Casey recruit for that meeting, I don't know a single speaker that I reached out who didn't jump at the chance of being at at that conference. It's a hugely impactful conference.
No, thank you. We've had a lot of fun and met a lot of people, so it's been, I think, really valuable for the firm.
Yeah. Great. So when you think back on your career and all these different parts that played a role in establishing you as this, what stands out to you as kind of the critical issue that helped you in the formation of your career?
Honestly, it was people. I have to say, it's meeting and working with people and doing a good job for them, being there, doing the right thing for them, and that was my motto. I mean, I had, there was so much going on in the Valley, but there were lots of people that could have done this work instead of me.
But can I add a spin to that? So I think people don't really realize the kind of things when Casey talks about that in the way it plays out. And and you've always done it with such a dedication to the industry and an almost selfless way of thinking about it. A couple months ago, I got a call from a guy who said, Casey McGlynn told me to talk to you. And he was he was trying to raise capital, and he was calling to find out about the Dublin conference that we hold at the end of April. And I'm talking to this guy about raising capital and steps that he could take. And I said to him, can I just ask you a question? I said, if Casey McGlynn is your attorney, why are you talking to me? You could be in no better hands in terms of raising capital. And he said to me, oh, Casey's not my attorney. And he rattled off some other name. And that was so typical. I can't tell you the number of times I'd have a conversation with Casey where I'd say, why are you helping that guy out? He's hired another law firm. He's not, and Casey would always say, no, you can't take that attitude. You have to help whomever comes in. And I think that kind of selfless dedication to not only to the industry, but the people who populate it has always been the thing that has stood out to me about the kinds of things that have come out in the various things that we've collaborated on. I mean,
well, I would just say what you do and how you treat people, it all comes back. So, if they're committed to, they already have a law firm, you can't expect them to just move because they have a telephone call with you. It's ridiculous. So, but the thing is, these guys and women might have 2 or 3 or 4 companies over their lifetime. If you could help them now, maybe they'll never hire me. Maybe they will the next time they start a company, or maybe they'll run into somebody else that's looking to start a company. And I feel like all you can do is you just what goes around comes around. And so I just feel like people get to pick whatever law firm they want to work with, but I think building relationships with all of them and watching them create products that are going to change the world and save lives, that's all you got to get out of it.
well, that's an outstanding commentary on your career, and working with you as I have, I know that attitude is reflected in the way you're perceived in this industry. But I wonder, as you think about how you've built your career and how things came together in this space, I wonder what reflections you have about how this industry has come together. Because you played such a central role, particularly the community here in this room, but even more broadly. I can't think of another attorney in this space that has had as great an impact on the creation, not only of individual companies, and I think the large number of people who are attending this either in person or virtually is a testament to the impact that you've had in this industry. It's hard for me to think of another attorney in this space who's played anything like the kind of role that you played in this industry. And it's really a credit to the career that you built and the companies that you've helped, that you established the kind of relationship and reputation in the industry that you have.
Well, I will just tell you, I'm the luckiest guy in the world in terms of having a practice and watching it grow and watching all these people change people's lives, save their lives or make them healthy when they were, very unhealthy. So it's been a fun and rewarding practice for me, for sure. And I know so many of you are in this industry also for that very same reason. It isn't about the money, it's about changing the world, about saving lives, about making this a better place, helping people who are suffering not suffer so much. Come on, sure, we got to take home some money to mom, and we got to make sure we can pay our bills, and hopefully we'll do real well. But nonetheless, I feel like all of you that are in this industry, or 99% of you, there's probably one bad apple here somewhere, are in there. All of you can think back and say, God, that was a lousy raise. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not going to give this industry up, whatever. So I say to you, thank you for all the things you guys are doing, because someday I'm going to need you.
Well, it's been an outstanding career. And like I say, you've touched so many companies and helped so many people and the point of my anecdote was with the selflessness of it, that this guy would call you and pick your brain and not turn to his own attorney, I think is so telling about the role and the reputation
honestly,
you have in this industry.
Don't make a person like that feel bad about calling, because all he has to do is say, hey, you're in Palo Alto, aren't you? There's a nice lawyer there. I don't need to get his business. I just need him to be my teammate. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's lots of ways for people to give back. It doesn't always happen in a direct way.
Well, you've been great in the way you've given to this industry, not simply in the building out of a major practice in this industry, but in the myriad ways that you've helped and reached out to people and given them assistance. I think it's, again, as somebody who's observed from the sidelines, the impact you've had and the interactions that I've had with people whom you've helped, I know it's been extremely meaningful. So we're right up against time now. So what I would say is let's thank Casey for his career and all the help he's given to everybody in this room. And we have
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank my family for all you guys do for me.
But again, as somebody who's been writing about medical devices for, dare I say, 40 years, I don't know of anybody in this industry who's had as great an impact and as helpful an impact on this industry as Casey. And it's been really the milestone of my career to call Casey a friend and
do I have a good
partner.
buddy here? Thank you so much, David.
So thank you so much. And we have a reception outside, and we invite you to the reception and join us in celebrating Casey's career. Do we want to take questions? Is that why we're bringing a microphone?
Actually, I was just going to make final comments and then let everyone enjoy the reception. First of all, great job, David. Thank you, and thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
I mean, I know we could all tell amazing stories. For me, I just remember I was introduced to you by Bob Anderson.
Right.
He didn't know me. I was nobody. Nobody knew. This is the very beginning of my career. And as soon as I decided to be an entrepreneur, Bob Anderson said, you have to, get Casey as your attorney. And I went in there, and he spent so much time with me. Who is this kid? Why would he spend so much time with me? But the thing that always amazed me, Casey, is that you always just gave of yourself and helped people, and you helped me. I remember all the many times, very early in my career, how your advice was so critical, and I know we can all tell that story. So many of us can, and I know there's many people on Zoom and online tonight that you helped our careers. You enabled us to do what we, do best. But we needed that advice. We needed that guidance, and you gave it. And so thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you for
and thank
saying
you for being a friend. You're just a wonderful human being, and I'm so pleased that we get to honor you tonight. It's an honor for us to do that.
Wonderful human being.
I want to just mention a few other events that are coming up. April 10th, we have 2 of the former patent commissioners coming for a very important event about the threat to the U.S. patent system. I think it's something that I hope all of you can attend, and at least attend online. It's going to be a very important event. Eb Bright will be moderating with some other panelists to discuss the issues. On April 19th, we have Angela McFarlane here. It's another Innovator's Workbench to honor her career. And on April 20th, we have the Fellows' final presentations in the Clark Auditorium at 6 o'clock. So with that, I will say thank you to everyone for attending, and wish you a good night, and thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks.